and welcome to yet another episode of How to Be a Great Player. In today's episode, we're going to follow through on the theme of how to build a type of relationship between yourself and your fellow players' characters. We're looking today specifically at role-playing family members. Now, this can introduce some very interesting dynamics into the game and have the very serious potential of ruining a game. So we must tread lightly when we are deciding to play brother and sister, or perhaps mother and father. So, what do we look at when we look at playing family members? Well, we start by looking at what's the reason for doing it. Why be a father and son pair rather than two comrades in arms, as in the previous video? Why have family involved, in short? Well, it's something different, isn't it? It could be quite fun to role-play a mother-daughter pair trying to beat up villains on the streets of New York in the 1930s. Perhaps it's something totally different that you've never done before, and the person who's now joined your role-playing group is a little nervous, and you decide to give them a helping hand by being their father. This is slightly different from the mentor role in the previous video because the father has a vested interest in making sure that his daughter remains alive. She's carrying his genetic code. Another thing to look at as to why to do a familial relationship is, well, simply it's a different type of relationship and one that carries with it, as I've alluded to already, a much more serious reason for it to continue working. We are talking about blood, and you'll see that we come to that a little bit later on as well. And finally, of course, it's an opportunity for quite a shared history. Basically, the shared history of one of the two participants' entire life, whether that's the mother, the daughter, the son, the father, the brother, the sister, however it works out, both of them will have had a very long history together. Well, presumably. We then need to ask the question, once we've decided to go with the family relationship type link, is blood thicker than water? In other words, are the two participants both absolutely dedicated to one another, or are they not? Is this the kind of relationship where, well, if you're starting to die and I run the risk of dying too, I'm just going to let you die? And the answer to this question is not very simple. You need to speak to your GM and say, well, what is the cultural requirements? What does society say that brothers and sisters should or should not feel for one another in terms of, is blood thicker than water? There are some cultures that don't see it that way, and there are others that see it as paramount. You will do anything for blood simply because you share some genetic markers that are a little bit similar to each other than to others. So it's a good question to ask and to establish up front. Once you've done that, once you've decided, right, we are going to be this pair, you then need to decide what type of pair. Is it a mother and a daughter? Is it a mother and a son? Is it brother and sister? Is it brother and brother? Are they twins? Is it father and son? Is it father and one surviving twin? Is it grandfather and grandson? However you want to work it. And there are lots of different reasons for going in different directions, which this video is not particularly focusing on, but you need to decide what kind of relationship is there between your two characters. Once you've decided what the connection is, you then need to look at what is the type of relationship. Is it a close relationship? Do they share everything with one another? Is there no secret between them? They are the best of friends, if you like. So they have a whole lot of the previous type of relationships. There's the sidekick, the wingman, there's the buddy, there's the almost confidant in that type of relationship. Are they protective of one another? Fiercely so. Is this a brother who refuses to let any other man or woman speak to his sister in a romantic way? Is it the father who's overprotective of his wife and will not allow her to say a thing towards anyone who has been negative towards her? So is it protective? Is it antagonistic? Is this a son who feels that he lives in his father's shadow all the time? Is it a mother who feels that she's overshadowed by her overachieving daughter? Is it two brothers who are vying to see who's better or to outdo one another? Is it a pair of sisters who are trying to have more children than one another to prove that they're more womanly than the other? Perhaps that's the antagonistic type. Is it a sexual type of relationship? There's one TV series and series of books currently that focuses very much on a brother and sister pair generating a lot of children that seem to get poisoned and murdered a lot. So is it some kind of sexual relationship? I am always nervous to go down this route. Some call me immature, but on the other hand, do we really want to sit there whilst you talk about how you are attracted towards your brother or your sister? And if you are in real life, well, that's great for you, but do you necessarily need to share it with the table? So sexual is definitely there and is something that you can explore. Perhaps it's a father who has mutilated his son and has now using his son as a shield, and the son has some kind of Stockholm syndrome where he feels that his father did it because he deserved it and so owes everything to his father. That's very deep for some kind of role-playing games. For others, well, that might just be the surface. Is it an unknown relationship? In other words, they don't know that they're related to one another. There are some similarities, but they have no hard evidence that they're related. They were separated at birth. That's a very interesting kind of relationship because once it is over, it then leads us to the next type of relationship which they could have, which is known but different or distant. So I know of you, but we didn't grow up together. I never saw you. It's been 20 years. I don't really know who you are now, and I don't really have much of a bond or link to you. But because of our blood link, perhaps we should try and build a relationship. That's another type of relationship, and of course the final type, and I'm sure there's others, you can list them below, but the other type of relationship is a cold one, where blood might be thicker than water, but we hate each other's guts, simply because, well, we do, and it happens. Sibling rivalry is well documented. So once you've established the type of relationship that you have with your significant relation, you then move on to answering that very important question, which has to be aligned. You have to answer your shared history. Now, if you go way back in the archives, you'll find that there's a video there on how to create backgrounds for your characters. This requires both players to sit at the table and jointly create backgrounds together so that the history is definitely shared. I don't have a different history from my sister. We experienced events in our past differently, but we experienced the same events. So we need to make sure that when we're writing those backgrounds that we do them together. And again, we need to sit with the GM and say, listen, this is what we're thinking of. When we were separated at age 6 by the orphanages because they felt we needed to go in different directions, was there any way that we could have kept in contact with one another? Is the technology available that we could easily have shared notes? Yes or no? Those kinds of questions. This is really a collaborative story effort and something that makes playing this kind of relationship very rewarding. You then also need to answer, why is the relationship in its current state? Why is it that you don't know of one another? Is it because you were separated? Is it because one of you died and was brought back to life later on by a benevolent priest or a rather vicious deity? Why is the relationship in its current state? And of course, you then need to answer, what kind of other relations are still alive? Is mummy and daddy still there? Is grandpa and grandmother still there? Are more children still around? I had a player who created a wonderful story for a dragonborn whereby they were all born in a nest, and of course the strongest ate their siblings, and his egg just happened to be knocked out of the nest during one of those combats, and once he hatched, he wasn't part of the nest, so he didn't get consumed by his bigger brothers. He then, of course, went on a long quest to try and find his brothers because they'd been separated, and to prove that he was worthy of standing next to them in combat. That's a lovely, long story arc, and of course he realized that they were just a bunch of bullies and that his companions he traveled with were much better than he was, and da 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 da. What a lovely story for him to go on, and that was just by establishing his relationships. Not so much about the relationships between party members, but, well, you get the point. Role-playing family relationships can be great, and it can force a whole lot of linkages together that don't normally exist. And it really does start you off with a solid ally, or perhaps a solid enemy who will come to your aid if push comes to shove. And there's some great examples of family relationships in books and movies, and you just simply need to be aware of them to say, that's going to be the one that works for me. Either way, I hope this has been useful. Until next time, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your questions below, leave your comments below, and let's share ideas with one another, because that's really where the magic starts. So, until next time, from me and the dogs in the background, happy playing.